you behind the scenes what it would be like to work with an artist in the gallery space when making the decisions about how to display the artwork. Today we've got some work that I've done myself. I have a painting and a few sculptural materials that we're going to be using today to talk about how we would display my work in a gallery space. So Imogen, are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay.
Yeah, April, thank you so much for bringing your work into this space.
Thank you.
And like sharing that process with me. Yeah, I'm saying this because I truly mean it, but that's also like such an important part of curatorial process too, is being like really giving and caring for being like invited in by the artist to share in their creative process as well. Yeah, it's like a very personal and beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Thank you. So you're kind of like, you're letting us know that it's equally important to have artists here and present when making those decisions.
Yeah, it's collaborative. It's
Okay.
a collaborative experience, to be sure. And as a curator, I want to know about your creative process and how you make work and what you think about when you make art. Could you tell me a little bit about your process in creating this painting?
Definitely. So a large part of my art practice comes from the act of walking. So I walk a lot in the city and I take a lot of photographs, and from those photographs I create collages and then paint from that. So a really big part of my experience within my creative process is walking to capture the things that I want to paint or think about. So then after I walk, I come to the studio and I create from those images that I make.
Well, they're really striking, like beautiful abstract images that sort of combine, it seems like, several different visual motifs and several different kind of like everyday objects that are layered into the process of the painting. Could you talk to me a little bit about that and the kinds of like materials and sourcing that you're using to create your work?
So one of the things that I'm really drawn to when I walk in the city is being, I really like being around construction sites. I think construction sites are really interesting because it gives me the ability to see that process of making and creating a space or a place that's in our city environment. And for a brief moment, you get to see these building blocks that make up that building. And I like breaking that down and thinking about those materials that we use to create our built environment. So in this painting, you might see different elements of those materials that I will capture in my photographs. So for example, this is like a wire grating that they use to lay down before they pour the cement on the roads. There are different like wooden elements in the image here that are to also capture these, which I also see a lot of my walks. They mark off the different areas when they're measuring the land of where and marking the land and where they're going to create or change. So I like that as well. And I like incorporating some sort of element of like representation of grid paper because it reminds me of planning and the types of materials that a planner or designer might use to lay out or to think about how the different elements of our built environment laid out on a grid. So really it's kind of this, combination of these different materials that I see in those specific areas.
Yeah, you can definitely see some references to architecture and the way that you create work and then incorporate found objects sort of interacting with the painting.
Yeah, so that's really important for me to also have the objects that I enjoy painting, to have more of a sculptural element that is an extension of my piece. So to me, painting and sculpture can kind of be, go together.
So amazing. So, and we'll keep that in mind when you're having these conversations with artists, you're keeping that in mind, the artist's intention, and also the viewer experience and like the person who's going to come into your gallery space or who's going to see your exhibition, wherever it might be, and thinking about what their experience will be, how they'll read the work. And it's important to have the sort of artist intention in mind when you're building that experience for the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
So as an artist, and thinking about people looking at your work, what is your intention? What are you trying to communicate to those who look at your work?
I really want to be able to communicate this idea of being present during the process of making or creating. So I like to be able to have that feeling of when you're walking in and you're viewing the work that this is in the process of becoming something. And having that feeling like the artist might come in at any time and change it or add to it or have that access into being a part of that making process, because that's how I feel when I'm actually in those construction spaces in the city. It's not going to always look the same, be the same if I come back the next day. It will change because I'm very aware that it's in the process of becoming something.
Yeah.
So that kind of feeling is something I really want to be communicated to my audience.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'm going to keep that in mind in the work that I do and in the collaborative work that we do together.
Yeah.
So I'm the curator, and April has just brought her work into the art space to curate into an exhibition.
Yes, so we're going to demonstrate what that would look like now as the curatorial role after hearing what the artist has to say and explaining what their process is and their goals are. As a curator, Imogen is going to take on the responsibility of thinking about how we're going to organize that work in the gallery space.
Yeah, I have questions too about the sculptural materials that we're going to create, sort of like an assemblage, kind of like a little built sculpture using these different materials.
Yes.
Cinder block, wood. I want to know, I guess I'm interested in how you would like these objects to interact with painting. So whenever you put one object beside another object, or one piece of art beside another piece of art, that's creating a kind of conversation or an exchange where both pieces are then affected by their proximity to one another.
Okay.
So I want to know how you see these different objects being in conversation.
So these sculpture elements for me in my experience when I'm walking are kind of obstacles. They're things that I need to move around. They're things that, disrupt my path. So ideally, I would like to have that similar kind of experience for the viewer. So if we are placing these objects in front of or beside to create this kind of obstacle that you have to walk around or have in your path when viewing the painting, that is the kind of feeling that I'm going for.
It sort of becomes part of the painting in a way, because if I am the person who's viewing the painting, and then in order to view it, I also am contending with these different objects being in my field of vision.
Yes.
It sort of becomes part of the painting.
Yes. So for me, the sculptures are really an extension of the painting and act as a layer to what this is. And also, it's really important for me to not hang the painting. I like it being leaned on the wall, because then it also becomes more of an object. It enters into the space, and it also is kind of invading my space as the viewer, where it's not this precious object that's hanging on the wall, but is coming into my space. I like that feeling too. So if we could leave it like that when we display it, that would be good.
Okay, good. Yeah, good to know.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And these are important questions that curators like to ask, about how do you sort of like interact and see what's happening in our gallery space, which is really cool, and we're able to like interact with the public in that way. So I think it's important to have the work leaning sort of up against this wall facing towards the window, so that that way people get an introduction to your work from that street view.
Wow, I never even thought about that. So as a part of the curator, you're also thinking about the structure of the space in the gallery, taking into consideration the window versus having this in the corner on the other side of the gallery.
Yeah, the architecture of the space is really important as well, and it's different for just like every different area that you're in. So
exciting.
So that's very vital. Yeah.
So we'll leave the painting here then.
I think maybe I'll move it over a touch this way.
Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, I feel good. I feel good about that. We're in the middle of our space now. We have our space. Okay, great. And next we're going to start to play with these objects a little bit and think kind of like collaboratively about how they can interact with the painting.
Okay.
So I guess curatorially, I would also sort of start to think about the composition of the painting as well, and sort of like areas where there's a little bit of negative space, and do we want to sort of like fill up that negative space with
okay, I see.
object?
So since there's the composition of the painting is here, and there's this empty space here, maybe we can have the sculptural elements here.
Yeah.
To add into this empty space.
Yeah, so that way for the field of vision, you get this kind of like
I think like that's
nice
great.
complementary image.
Okay, so we'll move this. If you want to put this in that area where you're thinking, we can switch spots here. And yeah, maybe we can have it move a little bit out so that way people could also walk in front if they'd like.
Yeah, when thinking too about curating, it's really important to consider as well like access and making sure that folks with all different like mobilities and experiences can think about the work and can also like move in the space. And yeah, very important.
That is also really important. So accessibility is something that curators will think about, and thinking about how different people will experience this space.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really vital.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen.
Okay. Cool.
So now I'm thinking we should use these. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we should use these. I know before you were talking about them potentially being like leaned up against. Yeah, and this is the part of the process too, where the curator is working really collaboratively with the artist, because the different ways that these different objects are utilized and are interacting with each other can just say very, very different things.
That's very true.
You know, I don't even know if that will work.
Like if we were to this here or there.
Yeah,
That's
is
very
saying something very different. Or like this. And then having these two pieces crossed over one another.
Yes.
Are then creating like this juxtaposition.
So we got to think very carefully about how the objects are communicating to each other as well.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Not just between the painting, but also the objects themselves.
Yes.
Perfect. We also have a piece of fencing. This is called orange snow fence. It's the type of fencing that they use in different construction sites. So, sometimes materials might be something you're not familiar with, and it is also really important to explain where they come from, what they mean, what they're used for. Every single piece has an important kind of background or story to tell. So I think this is great. I'm thinking, if I can say, that maybe we can both have them leaning, because it's important for it to...
I think that because these two like wood pieces, they have this same visual cue. Like they have this same sort of like ribbon, you know, tie around, and they seem to be like partners or like having a conversation or like they're a pair.
Yes.
So I think that we want, like maybe we want to keep them, like close to one another or like connected in a way. It's creating like a little bit of repetition.
I really like that. I think that that's important.
Yeah. As well, it's nice to have the height coming up on this side because then it's interacting really well with the painting where you have like this space is sort of rectangular and having kind of like a similar like mimicking happening. And this I think will be interesting. That'll be cool visually.
Yeah, I think that is awesome, and it's interesting because the way that you think about curating work is how I think about when I'm painting and thinking about composition. So there's a very similar type of visual language that we're using.
Yeah. It's all about like intention and intuition, which is so much about what making a painting or like making a drawing is also like drawing kind of same.
Would you say being a curator is sometimes playful?
It is, yeah. At least, I mean, it is for me, you know, and it always has been. Kind of like the play of seeing what, like, one thing, what does one piece look beside another, sort of like moving things around, and making those decisions is very playful. Yeah.
I love that. So, you know, if any one of you decide that you'd like to be a curator one day, you would know that it's safe to play and experiment and find new ways on how the artwork can be displayed or communicate with one another, and it can be fun just like creating a piece of artwork.
Exactly. It's so open-ended because there are so many different possibilities, and even how we've talked today about like the different ways that you set something up can, or that you curate work can say different things, and it can allow the work to operate in different ways in different things. Which is just so free when you think about it.
It's so exciting, and I'm so happy to be able to see and make those connections by working with you today.
This has been great.
So I think that this is great. In my opinion, I think this display is really well done. Thank you, Imogen. Let's just do a little bit of a walk around, and then that will be everything for this demonstration, I think. Is there anything else you'd like to add before?
Well, maybe we could, so another important part of this, like the final answer process, is also lighting the work and making sure that the work can look its very best in the space.
Okay.
But maybe I should do that off camera because it's not as interesting to watch, unfortunately.
Okay.
But then maybe we could do like a final shot, like the final product.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So, folks, what Imogen's going to do is she said that she's going to work with the lighting to light the work. And in the gallery space, you can't see it right now, but there are track lighting in here, and the lights can be angled in different ways to light up the work, so that way it really has the best visual experience for the viewers that come in the space.
And thinking about access too, that's another thing that is very important to us, is making sure too that the work is lit really, really well, so that even individuals who might have low vision can still clearly understand the piece of work and what it's trying to say, as well for even like the integrity and the strength of each piece. You want to make sure that it's lit really, really well, and that way it's just like even more just like bursting.
I love that. That's really important. I think that's something that we don't always think about goes into that process of curating, is that final touch of lighting.
Well, I'm sure anybody who's like created like a drawing or a painting or a sculpture knows that, you know, in natural light or in really bright light, that's when your work looks best. So we want to always be doing that for the artist as well from a curatorial perspective.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you, April. Thank you for bringing your work in.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, everybody, that's everything for So